As we reported earlier, the people of Sri Lanka are feeling somewhat dissatisfied with the private sector's performance post-war. Anushan Selvaraja sought the help of TNS Lanka to find out whether this is a fair assessment on the part of the populace.
Welcome to the Voice of Business. This week on the show I have with me Kunal Sharma, Country Manager of TNS Lanka, for his views on public perceptions on the private sector. Now Kunal, are you surprised at the number of ordinary citizens who perceive that the private sector as not being above board?
Well, it does come as a bit of a surprise, and I think an unfortunate one at that for the business sector certainly. However, you have to bear in mind that the public perception is skewed a lot with what they see and what they hear, which is primarily what they get to know through various forms of media. Now, the good activities or the good things that happen from the corporate sector don't really get that much publicity. It's the negative ones which people tend to hear about more. And when it is an issue which impacts the common man, for example, issues like Golden Key or Sakwiti, then of course, the resultant publicity surrounding that becomes huge. What it tends to do is that it tends to skew the perception towards a negative side. I think that's what is at play here.
Now, nearly 3/4 of TNS Lanka's sample population laments that businesses aren't paying reasonable wages. Is this fair? How much of this could be assumed to be biased?
I think irrespective of whether it is Sri Lanka or anywhere else in the world, most wage surveys or wage related questions do tend to have a negative response. At the same time, one must bear in mind the fact that whenever this happens in consonance with a high inflation, that is when salaries and increments are perceived to be more on the negative side. What in ordinary circumstances might be a good salary or at least a reasonable salary and a reasonable increment, coupled with high inflation, is usually tended to, people tend to see it as very negatively. I think that's what's happening.
Kunal, a large proportion, 42%, say they don't know whether or not business people practice what they preach to our politicians. Any thoughts on why this is so? Is there a fear factor or reluctance on the part of the working people to speak out?
Well, Anushan, I don't think this is really much of a fear factor or perhaps even a reluctance. What I think is happening is that when the public reads anything about business, it tends to be a very selective set of information that they receive. Okay. Now, in that case, what I think is that there is a high amount of fence sitting. To me, that is indicative of a strange scenario, which is that it's not really positive, it's not really negative, and there might be a mix of the two. Therefore, the responsibility completely devolves on the corporate sector or the private sector to manage this perception, and the way to manage this is by ensuring that all the corporate governance activities like due diligence, like due disclosure of financial statements, responsible auditing, responsible accounting practices are followed and published about in media to ensure that people really can look up to the corporates as following what they preach.
Are you surprised that training and recruitment were cited in response to a question about improving corporate performance? Is this a new trend of thought, and is there then a real need for better HR practices in our corporate world?
I can't really say that I'm very surprised by this finding. As a matter of fact, with the increasing growth trend in the Sri Lankan economy, there is a renewed hunger to succeed, a renewed hunger to expand, and that's not just limited to the corporate organizations, but it's also among the employees as well. Now, with this situation, what the individual employee feels is a need for training and development, and something that will enhance their skills, which in turn will be expected to translate into better roles, better salaries, and better future employability as well. On top of that, recruitment becomes very important because that's the foundation stone on which careers are built. So unless until recruitment strategies are strong and are in synchronization with the needs of the organization and the needs of the role, the final output really cannot be as good. I believe that the role of HR in Sri Lanka is on the cusp of a change. Gone are the days where HR role was just to be manage a set of employees or manage a set of workers. I think today it's about motivating individual employees, managing individual careers, tailor-making career plans for them. And I think that's where HR has to focus in the future.
That was Kunal Sharma speaking to Benchmark's Anushan Selvaraja. Thank you for watching our show. The holiday season is over. It's business as usual next week. So we'll see you again next week at the same time.